The game is called Boss Fighting Stages, by the way. Essentially, it is a PvE team-based experience where you and some strangers embark on a journey to travel the lands and eviscerate people in the name of heroism. That is it, really. For some further information, I'll only be rambling about the game itself as opposed to its community or any other exterior information. Introduction finish. Now for the core features of this game. Starting with the classes, there are 4 which vary in weaponry, health, speed, and damage. Beginning with Bowler, he is a character you may remember, for he had a good presence on the internet until people respected his wishes. Other than that, he is the fastest character in movement, being counteracted by being the most fragile. Additionally, he wields a dodgeball as his weapon of choice, which travels at an arc and deals moderate to impressive damage. Despite these perks, he is not an ideal class for beginners. The dodgeball requires understanding its physics, and the projectile can be extracted by your own teammates. Otherwise, he can make chapter progression more swift traveling throughout areas not inhabited by enemies. Now for the Picayune classes, which had no part in boosting the game's popularity, though having great, or even better, practicalities. This is Piercer. While he is slower than Bowler, he can handle more damage than his contemporary in red. He wields a bow as his weapon, firing arrows with zooms with great accuracy and celerity. Addedly, these arrows can pierce through enemies, awarding him the nomination of Best Class for Crowd Control. However, he deals the least amount of damage compared to everyone else, with his abilities doing most of his wreckage contribution. Despite that, he is the best candidate for a newcomer's first pick, thanks to his projectiles being easy to aim and his great survivability. Should the concept of cowardly launching arrows or rubber spheres to your adversaries perturb you, there also exist the melee classes. Charging forward and biting like a viper, his name is Slicer. He is Boss Fighting Stage's premier jack of all trades, having good movement, health, and the best gradual damage output in the game. He brandishes a sword for battle, accompanied with meteorological sorcery for his abilities. As a starter class, he is tolerable enough with his damage and speed. For more seasoned players, however, all of his aforementioned benefits make him a favorite, with a good number of people having no trouble solely using him. Last in order, we have the game's quintessential tank character, and one who I also hold admiration for. Green and mean, at least in character, we have Crusher. Greatest class health pool, lowest movement speed, the class subscribes to a philosophy of handling punishment. Speaking of which, he deals the greatest instantaneous damage out of any class, tearing through enemies as if they were sand. While not as mechanically interesting as Slicer, those who wish to contribute greatly with simple effort ought to play him. A high-level Crusher has the greatest potential to carry a server, with him shaving off precious seconds or even minutes during boss encounters. Should you wish to change your class, typing !rejoin into the chat bar will suffice. However, note that you have to wait until the server returns you back into gameplay, whether after an enemy encounter or a certain teleportation point has been reached. Now to cover another obvious aspect about the game, its HUD. While absolutely enthralling, it will be discussed tersely enough for your own well-being. Clicking on the arrow, located top middle of the screen, pulls out the menu, where you can emulate weapon damage, purchase Mysteliates, and apply skins. You may also notice an almanac section, though it has literally nothing useful or interesting to offer. It is just another thing to click on. To upgrade your firepower, click on weapons and purchase the most expensive option. Though if you are higher in levels, you should save some credits for acquiring a Mysteliate or two. Should you be curious about these Mysteliates, them and their nuances will be explained in a future segment. Simplistically speaking, they increase your damage, survivability, and apply status effects against opponents. At middle left are your 7 lives. Whenever you die, you lose 1. Additionally, the bar refills whenever an enemy wave or boss encounter concludes. Expectedly, enemies provide experience and force power upon death. The more experience you accrue, the greater damage you and your Mysteliates will output. As for the other one, do not worry about it too much, just collect it. At middle right is the damage leaderboard, showcasing the top 5 leaders in the aforementioned department. It just indicates who are the most able players in the server, granting bragging rights to the top person. Your health and stamina is at the bottom of your screen. Advancing immediately on the ladder, you can press Q or E to dash quickly at the cost of 25 stamina, alternatively double tapping W, A, S, or D to execute the action as well. If your stamina reaches 0 or below, you must wait a couple seconds before it begins to refill again. Lastly, there exists a rebirth mechanic to those who went through the trouble of reaching level 100 on each class. For the victims who play simulator games, you can recognize what this does. It resets everything for rewards, big boss points, used to purchase skins, and access to exclusive weapon cosmetics and Mysteliates. Indicated beforehand, boss fighting stages fits well to its name. Bosses are to be fought and stages cleared. Succinctly speaking, it is almost combat o'clock in here. Enemy waves are scarce throughout the game, varying in time. Moreover, there exists a few which last indefinitely until a certain objective is completed. More interestingly are the bosses, possessing special abilities, forms, sometimes, and perhaps amusing dialogue. For a general stricture in surviving their attacks, if you see a boss standing still, either jump on their head or dash away twice, with this latter technique more practical in later chapters. An important milestone in leveling up, you earn access to the wonderful abilities, henceforth called your Z move and X move. The first one is unlocked at level 25, dealing plenty more damage than your left mouse button attack. More spectacularly in aspect is the X move acquired at level 50, putting on a swell performance and unleashing colossal force, climbing your name some more on the damage leaderboard. For those wishing to maximize their wreckage, they must learn to utilize the limb-based system in attacking. To explain, every class, aside from Crusher, deals damage in how many limbs their weapons or projectiles hit. For example, you deal more damage with Piercer firing arrows at the adversary's sides as opposed to just their front, given that you're hitting both the arms and the chest. And now, I shall explain in greater depth of these phantasmagorical Mysteliates you see orbiting around my character and others. Beginning with the first tier, there exists the basic, healing, and strong Mysteliates. For the case of basic and strong, they should only be purchased if you are low in level. Their damage output is minimal and you can save a few thousand credits on more significant things. Healing, on the contrary, is a refuge in that it regenerates 25% of your health every 2 seconds, allowing you to be much more pugnacious in fighting. Onward to Tier 2, these Mysteliates offer much more practicalities than the previous variety. Ice is nice, dealing respectable damage and slowing down enemies. A neat mixture of offense and defense, while granting ranged classes an easier time aiming. For its more immaculate sibling, Fire fires a beam damaging multiple times in the span of half a second. A cheap and effective way to make yourself a useful player. Last and least, there is Wind Force, which pushes back foes from the player. You should only equip this Mysteliate if you're a ranged class or in a specific part of a non-canon chapter where it's much more necessary. Otherwise, using this Mysteliate in close quarters combat bulks melee users from letting their abilities and, in consequence, you receive mild contemption from them. To the majestic Tier 3 Mysteliates, they're the most impactful and expensive Mysteliates which one can regularly acquire. Quake, while requiring some time to wind up, unleashes a shockwave which clears out hordes and wounds bosses substantially. Darkheart is similar to healing, though heals your character by the power of lifesteal, firing a beam which damages fiends and healing 50% of your health. To the rightmost place we have Spike, poking out fine damage every quarter of a second in a small radius. This Mysteliate should only be purchased by melee classes, as its damage is halved should it be used by a ranged user. At Tier 4, this selection is interesting in the fact that there is still more to arrive. At the making of this video, Men is the only Mysteliate of note, costing 20,000 points and requiring the user to rebirth at least once. Upon purchase, it completely restores your health every 6 seconds, essentially healing's more opulent and august cousin. For the other two, we have to find out in the future, agonizingly enough. While most of boss fighting stages revolves around every word of its name, there also exists a plotline, mostly documented in the form of chapters. Chapter 1 is the closest thing to a tutorial in the game, placing you inside of a cube dimension with the server also teaching the basics of combat. There are 6 waves of enemies and bosses to endure against, gradually increasing in health and difficulty. Worry not, more fruitful sections lie ahead. Chapter 2 marks the first proper chapter, introducing the first characters, King and you, the protagonists, and plot objectives. Heading down the path leads to the castle, where you must break the gate while a conditionally indefinite swarm of knights pester you. After some time in defeating the Defender of the Almighty, 3 levers appear around the castle, all needing to be switched in order to open the gate up into the right hall. One eradication of Heavy Knight later, McSlash smashes into the fray and threatens to bisect you for beating up his accomplices. Defeating him once is not enough, however, as he engages in Crisis Mode, the common title of boss fighting stage's second forms, and averts his color scheme. After putting him in his place, you terrorize him further with cutting-edge humor. Chapter 3 shifts the scenery into a limbo of dark geometry, made worse by an apocryphal figure telling the protagonist what to do. Treading over some cubes, you barge into a castle and find foes to wreck through. Moving up to the second floor is where most of the action occurs. defeating a handful of waves and defeating the mysterious figure's henchmen. After the carnage, you must complete a burdensome obstacle course, which may or may not be made significantly easier thanks to physics tomfoolery involving dashing. Reaching to the top, the dubious individual reveals himself to be Azarath, and after declining his offer of joining his friendship circle, he attempts to dispatch you himself. Upon his defeat, he babbles about vague nonsense and ceases to ever make an appearance again. Chapter 4 has nothing bombastic to offer in bosses or in anything else, as you traverse through a cave and get partially soggy. Exiting out of the cavern and traversing through the Draco grasslands to enter the king's castle, you're greeted to the Masters, characters who definitely appear familiar, though why it is difficult to solve. Breaking topic, the king informs that the factory is causing ruckus to his communication magic, and commands you to destroy it. Chapter 5 has you in the aforementioned factory, rife with murderous mechanisms including robots and lasers. There are chambers which include waves of automatons and requests of hardware bereavement. After the first murder chamber, you find respite in pushing a cube around, your only source of comfort and certainty within the entire building. Passing through the second murder chamber, you jump into the generator room and defeat Static, the factory's machine-protecting machine. After you decorate the generators with dense and loose circuits, Slicer and Piercer informs that yet more work needs to be done in defeating the one who powers the factory, Techno Devil. Teleporting into his lair and knocking him out, he acquires the power of base, demoting him into the lamest boss in the entire game. After shutting him off for good, the server sighs with relief and goes on board to do more interesting activities. Chapter 6 opens with a man barging to the castle and threatening the king, who is then politely told to leave. In worry, the king teleports you to the arena for training purposes. After Bala uses natural charisma on Crusher into letting him perform sorcery, you enter the arena to fight against two powerful, though mostly benevolent spirits. Fighting against them individually, then together, then individually again, though in crisis mode, then together again, Slicer congratulates you on completing the first part of the test, much to the dismay of yourself. Chapter 7 continues the test, where you vie against all the masters one by one, albeit with them holding back partially. Defeating them all, Crusher finally acknowledges you as a competent fighter and everyone discusses for 11 minutes on lore, mostly in regard to their upbringing. During the flashback, we are blessed by a rare appearance of the Tubular Traveler, who magnanimously introduces himself for 7 seconds to then never be seen again. Otherwise, nothing maddening happens afterwards, other than the king being presumably kidnapped and leaving just about everyone in ambiguity for several years. Within boss fighting stages, there are techniques and glitches which should be utilized in optimizing your efficiency as a player and cutting time in clearing chapters. Of course, the most practical and interesting ones will be featured first. As Slicer, using Brandish, your Z move, immediately after Cleave, your X move supercharges its damage output, indicated by a title highlight underneath. This technique, known colloquially as Brandish, turns Slicer from an already formidable damage dealer into a weapon of single-target destruction. Continuing in ameliorating Slicer's power, you may notice that my crosshair succusses from side to side. Making use of the limb-based damage system, clicking and swinging your sword swiftly will vastly increase the ravage you will bring forth to your opponents in heights with the assistance of slopes or ledges. Easily enough, you have to press Q or E beside a slope to send your character flying vertically. Additionally, the earlier you execute this trick, the greater height achieved. It is oversights like these which make some of the more tedious parts of boss fighting stages, for instance, the Chapter 3 obstacle course, much more palatable. In the game, there exists a common misconception that walls are entirely definite in keeping the player enclosed. In reality, however, you can phase through thinner walls by rapidly pressing 1 on your keyboard while hugging them. Do note that only melee classes are able to perform this maneuver, and that the server's location affects the consistency of it. The closer it is to your place, the better. However, be very cautious when phasing through certain walls, as accessing certain areas early softlocks the server. Whenever an adversary spawns, they perform a jump shortly after. Knowing this fact, you can trap them onto your head, where you are mostly impenetrable to their attacks and give your ranged teammates an easier time aiming. Alternatively, the opposite can be done as well, where you jump onto the aggressor's head to stop them. However, this method is more dangerous in that the abilities of some bosses either begin at their head or affect a spherical area, like both Aqua or any boss after Chapter 5. For melee users, your weapon's hitbox lingers partially after your strike, so walking backwards and clicking places you in a solid defensive position. While not outstandingly game-changing, you are able to save on healing Mysteliates for better weaponry. Finally, this is more of a good habit than a technique. where you wait for your dash animation to finish before ensuing another. This will allow you to cover more distance and allow your stamina to briefly regenerate. Well, that is everything I want to cover. Though, if all this information enchants you with intrigue, there also exists content and topics which I have not yet covered, namely the non-canonical chapters and anything included in them. Other than that, much cheers for your attention, and I might see you in another instance of time.